The last known film footage of Adolf Hitler shows him inspecting a line of children. 20 boys stand at attention in the Reich Chancellery garden on the 20th of March, 1945. Each has already been awarded the Iron Cross. The Reich youth leader picked them and brought them to Berlin for the ceremony. Hitler is too unsteady to pin the medals himself, so Arthur Axmann does it for him. Hitler keeps his left hand pressed behind his back because it will not stop shaking. He pauses at the smallest boy in the row. Alfred Czech is 12 years old. He was decorated for driving his father's farm cart into Soviet fire near his village in Schlesien and bringing back 12 wounded German soldiers, 8 on the first trip and 4 on the second. Hitler pats his cheek and asks whether he was afraid out there. The boy answers, "No, my Führer." 6 weeks after the camera stopped rolling, Hitler was dead in the bunker beneath that garden, and boys like those he had just decorated were still fighting in the streets above it. The argument over why they fought began before the war ended, and it has never been settled. Were they believers, or were they trapped? American and British troops pushing into Germany in 1945 kept meeting the same enemy. Boys of 14 and 15 manning roadblocks with Panzerfausts, fighting on after the grown soldiers around them had quit. Some were so certain the Allies executed prisoners that they had to be coaxed out of their foxholes before they would surrender. The fanatic child soldier is one of the last war stories the Western Allies brought home, and the men who fought them described teenagers as more dangerous than veterans. A veteran calculates, a believer does not. Germany had spent 10 years building the boys who produced that impression. A law passed in 1936 began shutting down every competing youth organization in the country, from the scouting associations to the church leagues, and handed the Hitler Youth a monopoly on German childhood. 3 years later, a service decree made membership compulsory. Every eligible boy and girl could be conscripted over parental objection, and parents who resisted faced fines, prison, or the loss of their children. Boys entered the Jungvolk at 10 and graduated into the Hitler Youth proper at 14. By 1940, the organization counted 8 million members, which in practice meant nearly every child the Reich considered German. A boy born in 1928 had not started school when Hitler took power. He had no memory of anything before it. Every teacher he ever had, every film he ever saw, every song, every camping trip, every map on every classroom wall came from the same source. At induction, he swore the oath every one of them swore. "In the presence of the blood banner, I swear to devote all my energies and my strength to the savior of our country, Adolf Hitler. I am willing and ready to give up my life for him, so help me God." 10-year-olds said that out loud in front of witnesses as a condition of ordinary life. Stalingrad changed what the state wanted from them. In February 1943, the Sixth Army was gone, and roughly 250,000 German casualties with it. The SS put a proposal before Hitler: build an entire combat division out of Hitler Youth boys born in 1926 with veteran officers and hardened NCOs pulled from the Eastern Front to forge them. 17-year-olds with professionals standing over them. Hitler agreed in principle within days. That summer, more than 10,000 boys reported to the training camp at Beverloo in Belgium, and by the 1st of September, the rosters held over 16,000. It was a panzer division whose rank and file came from a single school year. Quartermasters gave the recruits candy instead of the standard tobacco and alcohol ration because many of them were too young for either. Allied newspapers called the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend the baby division. The joke died in Normandy. Committed against British and Canadian forces around Caen in June 1944, the division fought with a ferocity that unsettled the men facing it. As many as 156 Canadian prisoners of war were murdered by its members, most inside the first 10 days, a count Canadian war crimes investigators spent years assembling. At Ardennes Abbey, outside Caen, 20 prisoners were walked into a stone garden and shot in the back of the head. 1 in every 7 Canadians killed in Normandy between the 6th and the 11th of June was executed after he surrendered. 2 months after the Falaise pocket wrecked the division, Axmann stood in a Potsdam courtyard and made another announcement for the cameras. 70% of Hitler youth boys born in 1928, he said, had volunteered for military service. The propaganda ministry offered that number as proof of devotion. Read it the other way, and it asks what happened to the 16-year-olds in the other 30%. Brettheim answers it. In April 1945, 4 15-year-old Hitler youth boys arrived in this Franconian farming village. They were there to hold it against approaching American armor. Between them, they carried 3 Panzerfausts, 1 rifle, and a few hand grenades. 2 villagers did the arithmetic the boys could not. A farmer named Friedrich Hanselmann and a village official named Friedrich Uhl took the weapons away and threw them into the village pond, and the town prepared to survive the war's final week. The SS arrived that evening and began interrogating the population. Uhl ran. Hanselmann came forward on his own, and within hours a drumhead court condemned him to death. The mayor, Leonhard Gachstatter, and the local party leader, Leonhard Wolfmeyer, were ordered to sign the sentence and refused. 2 days later, they were tried at the corps headquarters in Schillingsfürst and sentenced to hang beside him. On the 10th of April, at around 8 in the evening, all 3 men were hanged from the linden trees at the entrance to the Brettheim cemetery, placards around their necks naming them traitors. The detachment that carried out the sentence was made up of SS men and Hitler youth boys. The bodies stayed up for 4 days. The standing order was that 10 more men would hang if anyone cut them down. A week later, the Americans took Brettheim anyway, and 17 villagers died in the fighting. Brettheim was 1 village. The apparatus behind it was national, bureaucratic, and dressed in the language of law. Mobile courts-martial roamed the collapsing fronts with the authority to try, sentence, and execute a man inside an hour, and they cited subversion of the war effort, signed warrants, and filed whatever paperwork they could. Formal military courts handed down as many as 30,000 death sentences for offences including desertion, subversion, and cowardice, and carried out an estimated 20,000. Just over 9,000 executions appear in records through the end of 1944. That leaves most of it in the final months, when the courts were killing faster than they could file. A German teenager weighing his options that spring did not need statistics. The bodies were on display. Brettheim taught the deeper lesson that the rope was there for anyone who tried to take a boy out of the fight, including his own neighbors, and that the boys themselves could be made to pull it. Nobody wrote down what the 4 boys made of it. In Berlin, that April, boys rode bicycles to the bridges with Panzerfausts strapped to the frames. The Hitler Jugend division was hundreds of miles to the southeast, bleeding out in Hungary and Austria, so the defense of the capital fell to whatever the Reich could still reach. That meant Volkssturm levies of every able-bodied male from 16 to 60, and the Nazi Party, not the army, controlled them. How many boys died in that fighting has never been established. Nobody was keeping lists. Some units existed only on paper, others lasted a week. Children drew weapons from depots that recorded nothing. Follow the 2 boys from the Chancellery garden and you get the shape of it. Willi Hübner, 16, had received his Iron Cross from Joseph Goebbels at Lauban 11 days before he stood in that garden. At the banquet that evening, Alfred Czech volunteered for the front. He went to Freudenthal in the Sudetenland where a bullet passed through his lung. He was released from a prisoner of war camp in 1947 at the age of 14. He walked 250 miles home. There, he learned that his father, a disabled veteran of the First World War, had been pressed into the Volkssturm and killed in the final weeks. The same state that decorated the son had already fed the father into the machine. 60 years later, Czech was asked what he had actually been, and his answer refuses to settle it. Even at 12, he said, he was an enthusiastic supporter of Hitler. He also said he pulled those soldiers out of the fire from a sense of duty to other people rather than for Hitler, and that he would have done the same for Russians or Poles. He was both. By that last spring, the balance across Germany had tipped hard toward coercion, and everyone involved understood it. One boy at a Berlin bridge has spent 10 years learning what to believe, and he wants to be exactly where he is. The boy beside him passed a body hanging in a village square on the way there. Both are holding a Panzerfaust. Both will die the same way, and the state that put them there never needed to know which was which. That is what Germany built between 1933 and 1945. An education system manufactured belief. An information monopoly starved every alternative. A terror apparatus punished the ones it failed to convince. They were built in different years for different reasons. At the end, they locked together into a single trap. The Allies asked whether these boys were fanatics or victims. The system was engineered so that it never had to care. After the war, both answers turned out to be useful. Germany needed its sons to have been coerced so the country could rebuild around them. The rest of the world needed them to have been fanatics. That made the horror look like one regime's aberration rather than a demonstration of what a state can do to a child it fully controls. Over the next 70 years, veterans gave interviews that split down the middle. Some admitted they never worked out which they had been. So argue it. What actually held that line in the final weeks? 10 years of belief or the rope in the village square? Subscribe if you want history that follows the machinery after the textbook stops. Thanks for watching.